Today's world is a really confused place. We have all sorts of people claiming that they were hurt or that they're made fun of, excluded, they feel isolated. Republicans, Democrats, each group feels that they've been treated poorly, that they have been cast aside as irrelevant. Minorities, they feel that they have been left out of the world because the white population is supposedly at the highest point of the of society, and even the white population feels that they are being mocked because of what the minorities are accusing them of. And this whole thing relates back to the racial stereotypes that I talked about last week. They create tension in our society, and they don't let us carry out the tasks that we need to carry out in order to improve our society. And so I want to talk about ways that we can try to lessen the amount of stereotyping that goes on in the world, and how we can help the younger population fix the problems that previous generations have messed up. And so one of these things that I want to do is I want to start a program in the schools that teaches young kids about racial stereotyping. And I know, like, teaching a 5th grader or a 4th grader, that doesn't seem like a very good idea. They're so young, right? And so my plan is to start out small, and by the time they reach senior year of high school, you're talking about the issues that we have. And so, like, for example, we can talk about the Latin countries and how they're so often mistaken for one another. So we have Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, all those places. Every time somebody sees somebody of that descent, of Latin descent, they just immediately think, oh, they're Mexican, and they go off of that. But no, there's so many different cultures down there, and there's so many different lifestyles. You can't just assume there's one. So what I hope to do is to start a program in the younger years of a child's life, so in elementary school, that teaches geography, teaches where each of these countries lies, and how close they are together, but also how far apart they are. And by doing this, you can kind of help them understand that there are different places in the world that have very similar ideas. And as they move through school, and they reach the middle school years, then we can build upon that, and we can talk about how each of these individual countries that they learned about in elementary school has its individual culture, and that can help them understand, okay, so not all of these Latin countries are Mexican. There's all sorts of people that come out of Latin America, right? And so, like, different languages even. That's a big difference, and so many people don't know that in Latin America, you don't just hear Spanish. So just in middle school, I want them to expand upon how there's different countries, and to see that each country has its own culture. In high school, I want to expand upon the cultures and talk about how each culture is misrepresented or stereotyped within society. And so now this is where we'd stop and we'd say, oh, this is a student from Guatemala, and he's been called Mexican all his life, and he doesn't know how to explain that he's not Mexican, he's Guatemalan. These are very common differences, or very common misunderstandings that happen all the time, right? they blend together, and it just becomes one big stereotype as opposed to, you know, 5 or 6 individual cultures. It's the same all over the world. Asian countries are just like that. It's not just Latin America. Japan, China, Korea, Philippines, all of those places are mistaken for each other, if that makes sense. They don't have their individual place in society because people just squish them together. And that's become a huge issue here in the United States. It's all over the place. It creates all sorts of tension. If you look at the presidency, what's going on in there, there's a whole lot of racial tension going on right now because of the things he says and some of the stereotypes that he brings up. And you know, I hope you guys feel the same way, that this needs to stop, and that we need to see people, and we need to understand their culture. We can't assume what they're like. We have to actually know them before we can talk about how these people live their lives, you know? And like, even with all these ideas that I'm presenting right now, it's so hard to fix this issue. And I think that even trying is better than doing nothing.